Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to be discussing the upcoming Death Cross. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. I do understand that the title Death Cross is a bit sensationalist, and I do sometimes think maybe we should use a different word for it. But that is what people talk, that's what people discuss it as, and so we will continue to go with the nomenclature that they use. I do want you to be aware, though, that while it sounds bad, a death cross and a golden cross sounds really good, oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes what happens in the short term is the reverse of what everyone's expecting. But as you fast forward a few more weeks, the larger trend continues to take hold. So if you're unfamiliar with what a golden cross and a death cross is, a golden cross is when a shorter term moving average crosses above a longer term moving average, such as the 50-day SMA crossing above the 200-day SMA, like we saw back over here in early 2023. A death cross is when a shorter term moving average crosses below a longer term moving average, such as what we are likely going to see here within the next week or so. But again, what is interesting is how oftentimes, but not every time, the price action will do the reverse of sort of what the name implies in the short term, but the overall trend tends to remain intact. Okay? So let's break this down so you can see what I mean. Back in February, Bitcoin got a golden cross. But from the point that we hit that golden cross on February 6th or so, you can see that Bitcoin actually dropped about 8%. Okay, so what it shows you is that in the golden cross, we actually first got a move lower before the trend to the upside continued. Okay, so you first had to move lower and then we went up. If you were to go back to 2019, you'll actually see very similar price action. Okay, first, look at this golden cross. What do you notice by this golden cross? Bitcoin in 2019 dropped about 13% after the golden cross. And then on the first death cross that came after this golden cross, you will see that Bitcoin actually pumped into the death cross, right? So there's a death cross here in October of 2019, but really on the day that the death cross occurred, Bitcoin went up a lot. I mean, back then it went up over 16%. And it was still just a lower high though. So what we saw back then was we saw a dump just before the death cross, a pump on the day of the death cross, and maybe a couple days later, only for it to fade back down and put in a new low a few weeks later. So, sort of recap here. What we historically see, and again, I'm sick, which is why my voice might sound a little different, but the markets don't sleep. When you get a golden cross, you'll often see the price drop and then go up. And when you get a death cross, you'll often see the price go up and then drop. So in both cases, you see the reverse price action in the short term as to what the name implies, but on a longer time frame, like a weekly time frame, like several weeks, say 3 to 4 weeks, the overall trend tends to remain intact. And we've seen that play out time and time again. Now, there are examples where it doesn't necessarily play out, right? If you were to go back through all of history, there are examples where you get a golden cross and the price does not immediately go down, or you get a death cross and the price does not immediately go up. It's just that we have often seen this. And, maybe one example is, during the pandemic, in fact, here we had a golden cross, right? We had a golden cross. And what happened with this golden cross is actually price kind of went up a little bit, came back down, and then it dumped down into a recession. So there are always going to be exceptions to the rule. Just because we typically see a pump into a death cross and a dump into a golden cross followed by a continuation of the trend, that does not mean that it always has to play out like that, although there are plenty of examples of it. Okay? Even here in 2020, when we got a golden cross, you can see that price dropped before then going back up and going on a parabolic bull run. So I do want you to be aware that while it is a sensationalist name, Death Cross, historically, you pump into it. Like on the day of the Death Cross, or maybe a day before, you pump into it. If you were to really break this down to look at this price action for Bitcoin back in 2019, it's actually still eerily similar. You had a relatively lackluster price movement for several weeks, followed by a daily close well below the prior daily closes, right? So this daily close here was about 5 to 6% below these other daily closes, and Bitcoin was operating in a pretty tight range over here, right? You can see that Bitcoin got below that 50-day moving average. It then kept holding resistance on it. And when we wicked up here in mid-October, you can see that we came off the 50-day SMA. Now, if you were to fast forward to today and see what's going on, you'll see very similar price action, right? Bitcoin below the 50-day, wicks up to the 50-day only to come back down. But we are also going into that death cross just like we were in 2019. So sort of raises the question, is it going to repeat what it did back over here in 2019, where you do get those daily closes a few percent below the prior daily closes, only to then wick up into the death cross? But if that happens, which there's no guarantee that it does, but if it does happen, then the expectation would still be for it to just be another lower high and for the trend to still remain down, likely for the rest of the year. One thing to remember is that in 2019, once we got below the 100-day moving average, after we fell below that bull market support band, right? So after Bitcoin fell below the 20-week SMA and sustained it, we never had daily closes back above the 100-day moving average. You can see that we wicked above the 100-day on that move into the death cross. Bitcoin wicked above the 100-day moving average, but we did not actually get any daily closes above the 100-day moving average. And the general trend of Bitcoin still remained down basically for the rest of the year. So today, the 100-day moving average, for those who are curious, currently sits at around 28,385. If we were to follow the path of 2019, then it would still seem likely to sort of see some type of a sell-off into a death cross, or at least maybe a week before, which would be around now, but only for it to pump up into the death cross, if that makes sense, right? So, you could see something like this, where it falls down, maybe it takes out this prior low and then pumps up. If you're to go back to 2019 again, what you'll notice about this low here that is sort of worthwhile is that it took out the prior low. That was why it was important, okay? We talked about this before as well. What happens is that today, everyone's looking at Bitcoin and we're saying, oh, it's a higher low. We're all good, right? I mean, Ethereum is already screaming it's a lower low, but we haven't seen that lower low on Bitcoin just yet, right? That low would be, we would need to go below 24/7, below 24/7 for it to be a lower low. In 2019, what happened? We went just above this low here, right? Just above it. After we closed below the bull market support band, right? We went just above it. We consolidated there. We wicked up near the 21-week EMA, came back down, only to put in a slightly lower low, right? It was a slightly lower low. Now, what happens, I suppose, when you put in a slightly lower low is that everyone who previously said, well, technically this is a higher low, all of those people say, all right, the trend is gone and then they sell their Bitcoin, is what I'm guessing often happens, right? They say, all right, it's a lower low, the trend is down. And then right after these people sell upon the new lower low, you then wick back up to the bull market support band. Here you can see we actually went slightly above it, but we did not get any daily closes above it. We did not get any weekly closes above it. So, if price action still follows a similar pattern, you should at least be aware of that playing out like that. So the way that it would play out, if it's going to repeat it, right, would be to sort of see, if we were to draw a path. Let's see if I can find it here. Um, it's been a while since maybe it's under this one. I think they move some stuff around, and so it's harder to find some of the stuff as it previously was. But anyways, the general idea is to just draw a path, right? I can't find it right now. The general idea though would be if it were to fade here, put in a slightly lower low, right? Maybe below 24.7, 24.8. Maybe it goes down to 24.5 or 24.6. And then it's a new low, right? And then perhaps from there we get another move back up, and then we fade back down. And then by the end of the month or something, or maybe early October, we go decisively set a new low. That would be if it plays out like it did in 2019, right? There's no guarantees that it will, right? I just want you to be aware that oftentimes in a death cross, which is what we're about to knock on the door of, oftentimes with a death cross, the bad price action already occurred to cause the death cross, so that when the death cross comes, everyone sells into it, only for it to then, price to then pump into it. Okay, so hopefully we've done a decent job of showing, prior history and showing how oftentimes Bitcoin, it can first sell off, get everyone scared, then pump up into a death cross, only for the overall trend to remain intact, right? So yes, in 2019 we got a pump, but it was still a lower high, right? It was still a lower high. That was a lower high. And then we came back down and put in a new low. But this lower high did not occur until after we took out this prior low over here. So I would still look for that as a potential outcome here. Maybe selling off below 24.7, only for it to scare people right before the death cross, then pump up into the death cross, then sell off into a more sustained lower low by the end of September or October. Just a potential outcome that I think people should be aware of. If we were to just update where we are with the bull market support band, the 20-week SMA now is at 28,111. The 21-week EMA is at 27,341. So if there is another push to the upside in the coming weeks, the expectation would be that while you could always wick above it, there's a good chance that this will provide resistance for the remainder of the year, this bull market support band. So I would not expect to see Bitcoin getting, multiple weekly closes back above $28,000. If you do see that, then it would likely be some type of invalidation based on what we've been expecting, and that being about we spend half the year going up and half the year going down. But do just be aware that you can sort of see these sell-offs followed by a pump into a death cross, only to then sell off again to a new low. And if it did do that, it would more or less be par for the course, rather than taking anyone by surprise. Okay, so just some history there on the death cross. And while we are likely going to get to the death, we are likely going to see a death cross. There are no guarantees. If Bitcoin were to pump now aggressively, then it's possible that a death cross is avoided. But at this rate, as long as price action remains, sort of continues on the status quo, just sort of extending out. I mean, again, it's not perfect, right? But if you just sort of extend out the 200-day SMA and the 50-day SMA, we would be expecting a death cross probably within a week or so. Okay, so maybe by mid next week we would get some type of a death cross. So if it were to follow 2019, it would mean first, perhaps Well, first, I mean, if you follow 2019, it would be like, go slightly up, then go down, put in a new local low, then pump into the death cross, then fade, then drop into a new low, right? That's if it were to follow 2019. Regardless of whether it pumps into the death cross or not, I think it's irrelevant. I do think that Bitcoin will spend the rest of the year mostly in a downtrend. And while there likely will be some pumps back up just to get people to YOLO back in, just like there were in 2019, just remember that it is likely to be another lower high. It's sort of like the Ether Bitcoin valuation, right? How a lot of people have looked at that and they say that it's held up well, and while that might be the case, there still is this kind of this harsh reality of it's just putting in a series of lower highs, right? So we might see something like that play out for Bitcoin as well, where everyone gets excited on every single pump, but it just ends up being, another one lower high after another. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Bitcoin did something like that, where it kept pumping back up just to put it in a lower high. So just be on the lookout for something like that. If we don't get a pump into the daily death cross, right? So if we come down here and then we move back up, and we don't actually get a pump into a death cross, and then we just kind of fade it down immediately, which is still a good chance that something like that could happen. It could be caused due to recession fears getting pulled forward, okay, which might happen with oil rallying and the dollar rallying. So do be aware that that is also a potential outcome where you sort of get a pump into a death cross, but it's not what a lot of people would want, and then it just fades immediately, rather than being a more significant lower high. So my expectation in the coming weeks is that Bitcoin will hit 23K. I don't know exactly when it's going to occur. In fact, if we were to pump into a death cross, you might even see it get close only to fake out and then go down, right? I will say, I don't trade this stuff, right? If we don't get a dump or a pump into I don't really trade this stuff. I don't really care. I'm just trying to provide insight into what theoretically might happen based on historical results. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. It's not financial advice. It's just based on my own experiences, and hopefully my own experiences of prior pre-halving years have kept some people from getting wrecked, especially in the altcoin market, right? Half up, half down. It's likely what's going to happen for Bitcoin this year. And if it did do that, it would not be surprising. It would not be surprising at all, because that's what it's always done. That's what it's always done in pre-halving years, is half up, half down. And every pre-halving year, people say this time's going to be different. We're going to have, a peak that's shifted much earlier in time, and then it doesn't happen. And then about halfway through the year, Bitcoin rolls over in Q3 of the pre-halving year in August or September, thanks to a seasonal correction in the S&P, and it kicks it into a downtrend. But for some reason, every cycle, every 4 years, every pre-halving year, people say this time is different, and it ends up not being different. Okay, so just be careful with that mentality. Historically, history shows this time's likely not going to be different, and whatever pumps come our way for the rest of the year are likely going to be lower highs. Now, it is possible to take out this high, right? It is possible to take out this high, but I would not expect us to take out this one. Okay, so I would not. I think this is a high. This is a lower high. This might be sort of an intermediate high, sort of like how this one was. I don't, while it could go back up, I don't think that we will take out this high. So I don't think it'll go, to 31K or something, right? I don't think it's going to go to 31K. That's my guess. Anyways, we'll wrap it up. And by the way, if it goes to 31K, so be it, right? I don't, it is what it is. Anyways, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you guys for tuning in. Subscribe if you're not subscribed, give the video a thumbs up, and check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. I'll see you next time. Bye.